Hi, and welcome to the Brothers of Dynasty live stream edition. I'm your host, Josh Christensen, joined as always by my two brothers, Jay and Andrew, who went on a wild bachelor party this weekend that I didn't go on. How are you feeling, Andrew? You were surprisingly low energy before we got on this live stream.
Yeah, I'm not feeling great. But here I am drinking some of the remnants of what we brought home.
There
this
we go.
Is the
Hair of the
substance
dog.
from Bissell Brothers. I don't think it's medically advisable that I'm drinking again, but you know what? We do it for the pod.
My liver. My only liver.
Yeah.
Andrew's been
Only
drunk
have
since
one.
Friday night. Yeah, I mean, you only liver once, right, guys? YOLO. That's
right.
what,
Yeah.
I don't know. Was
That's
that
for
Bruno
sure.
Mars? Who did the YOLO? Who came up with YOLO? I'm sorry, no one came up with YOLO.
I'm pretty sure it was the Lonely Island guys who did.
That sounds about
Yes,
right.
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
They at least had a
YOLO.
song about it.
yeah was
Yeah.
it Adam Levine?
That
on
was not
track?
a parody at all. Yeah, probably.
It was from their more serious track.
That was their serious
when-
album that they put
like when H-Town released a gospel album. That's
their song "Heart in a Box." I think they did.
Heart in a Box.
Yeah.
I just like the idea that the Lonely Island guys had like an existential crisis in the middle of YOLO, being like, you only live once. And then they're like, oh my God, what am I doing with my life?
Oh,
This is
no.
the only one I have. Like, and they just start freaking out.
Oh no, I'm gonna die someday.
How much money we wasted on this video? What am I doing?
You know how much time I spent writing I'm on a boat? God damn it! Can't do this anymore.
Do
Wasted
you know how
my
much
life.
we paid T-Pain for this video?
Jesus Christ. I should have taken out a life insurance policy. Anyways, Jay, what are you drinking today?
My
Oh.
children are going to be left destitute.
One more, Andrew. Keep going. Low
No, I'm
energy
done.
to yes,
I'm
and
tired.
like it's his job. I'm drinking also the substance. Same thing as Andrew. Get that in the camera there. That's from Bissell Brothers Brewing.
You
Which
don't
we
have
went
to.
to this
You
weekend.
don't need to narrate what you're doing. We are in a visual medium now.
I everything I do,
But
I
this
have
does
to
get
explain.
sent to pod later, so
Yeah, that
it
does.
helps.
So,
That is true, Josh. So for
Holding
the
to camera,
pod
holding to
listener-
camera.
so for those of you listening to the podcast, make sure you just Google what Bissell Brothers the Substance
Yeah,
can
definitely
looks like.
Google that because you should support them. Head up to Maine, Portland.
Yeah.
And, check them out. Awesome brewery. I've been there many times. And
Yeah.
get their stuff. You could probably order swag online. They should be a sponsor of the show. I'm just pushing their stuff here. But
Bissell
Yeah,
Brothers,
they
hit
need
us
it.
up at brothersofdynasty@google.gmail.com. I don't know. That's not an email address.
yeah, don't use
Well,
that.
now everyone's confused.
Our phone number is 555-455-5545.
5572.
The Brothers of
That's a
Dynasty
Christensen joke.
is we have to plug. The Brothers of Dynasty are part of the Fantasy Football Collective network of podcasts. You can find the Fantasy Football Collective at FF_collective on Twitter. That's collective with a K. For other great content and podcasts like the Fantasy Nightcap, the Fantasy Boardroom, and Collective Knowledge. So check that out when you get a chance. I believe actually one of those shows is on at around 10 after or 9:30 after this show finishes up, right?
Yeah, sometimes collective knowledge when Shane has a guest on there usually goes on 9:30 or 10 on tonight. So I'm not sure if he has I didn't see any tweets about that today, but unless I
Joel,
missed it
yeah.
while I was working. But always check out the collective their Twitter account, and they'll plug all of the shows coming up.
Yeah, and also remember to subscribe and follow all of those podcasts wherever you listen, if you don't want to watch the live streams, that is. So let's move on to some football talk of the week from another week 11, where we're just starting to see more and more bad losses, and I just don't think there's any really good team except maybe the Cardinals, who seem to be immune from losing at this point. But it was another week where we saw Titans lost to the Houston Texans. Buffalo got routed by the Indianapolis Colts, which we'll get to in a minute because that was basically a team of one for Indy. But yeah, a lot of interesting storylines as we come down the stretch of the season and head towards the fantasy playoffs. So we're going to spend a little more time than we have in the past few weeks on the storylines of the week, because I think there is more stuff to talk about than normal this week. And then after that, we're going to get to some we're going to power rank our contender buys for the end of the season as you make your stretch run for the playoffs and try to win that ship. But let's start off and go around the horn with some storylines, starting with you, Jay. What is your first pick of a storyline of the week?
Well, I don't think you can start with anybody but Jonathan Taylor, right?
Why? What did he do?
He played. He ran the ball. Scored
How many
touchdowns.
catches did he have? Did he have a lot of catches?
Run good,
catches.
good run.
Not
not a lot.
Hashtag not
He
a
ran
pass
the ball
catcher.
well. He had 3 catches for
He did
19
have a
yards.
few
That was
catches.
it. He had. We want to talk
It
about how
helps.
he's involved in the passing game. Really involved there.
Yeah, listen, I want to get on board
One
with
of those
Jonathan
was a
Taylor,
receiving
but
touchdown, so
just
Right.
not enough PPR value for me.
yeah.
I know, not a pass catching back.
How do you
Drop him
survive
immediately.
in a PPR landscape?
Well, you know
without
how you
that?
do that? You have 32 attempts and run for 185 yards and 4 touchdowns and
Tell 'em,
add a
Jay.
receiving touchdown. And basically, like Josh said, single-handedly dismantled the Buffalo Bills, the vaunted Buffalo Bills defense that had really played well up until this point and had no chance with Jonathan Taylor this weekend. If you saw highlights from that game, it was just a masterclass in running back, speed, just bouncing, like his quick cuts and lateral movement. He basically had guys falling over trying to tackle him at points.
Like
Just everything you want from Jonathan Taylor. And it's not like this is new. Like, we've talked about him before, so we don't have to go crazy here. But man, he's been crushing it since about week 4. Just go back through his games. They're pretty much 20 or more points in PPR. Since that point, he had like an 18, so we'll round that up to 20. But man, last 3, 34, 24, and then 53 points. Depending on your scoring, that could vary. That could be like 70 points if you have some wild scoring out there.
it was 50
it.
plus, I think,
people
in
do.
all formats.
Like if you do first downs and stuff, you're getting to the 60s. Just an insane. And
Yeah.
we talked about this on our RB Dynasty. We had him ranked as our consensus number 1, so we were there.
Uh-huh.
And he is just, for anybody who really believed in him, didn't buy into the fear of Wentz injury at the beginning of the year or Quentin Nelson going out, which were concerning at the time. But the people that believed and drafted him,
I said
especially in
nay.
redraft, you are reaping the benefits of that now, and you are probably a contender for your redraft titles. And if you have him in Dynasty, hopefully you got a good team around him. You should be making a push as well. He's replaced Derrick Henry as the guy that might be winning people championships this year.
I'd love it if Derrick Henry was still playing right now. I mean, just that'd be good for football and fantasy in general for the competition. But it'd be interesting to see where they'd stack up against each other at this point after this big game. But also, I think they made a big note about how he's like at this point hit 8 games in the streak of 100+ yards per game, which
all purpose,
I am forgetting. Yeah. So he's
tied
looking to break
LaDainian Tomlinson.
Yeah, tied
LaDainian
LaDainian Tomlinson.
It's pretty much the same run of
which is-
games that I just described. He's basically had 100 or more every one of those games.
Yes.
And then we wanted usage earlier. Now it's finally ticking up to where he's getting over 20, which has happened pretty much 4 out of the last 5, at least 20 touches or more.
That's
To
what
get
you want.
this guy the
That's
ball.
where you make things happen.
Get
Like
it close to 30 every week to get it there. And
Yeah.
Man. Yeah.
You know what's crazy though? Derrick Henry played 8 games and has been out for 3 weeks now. He still has 26
number 6
more carries. I mean, in terms of fantasy points, but just in terms of carries, he has 26 more carries than Jonathan Taylor, who has the most carries of anybody else.
Yeah,
in the
Taylor
league.
just passed them in points because of that. Like Henry's volume was so insane that he just still remained as like the number 1 total points guy until
that's unreal.
Until now, just because he was getting the 30 touches a game.
Yeah,
and Taylor was averaging like 18, and now we're finally starting to creep up into the low 20s, and now over 30 this past week.
Yeah, and even with that volume, his efficiency still stays really high. Like he's got
It's the
5.8
best,
yards
really.
per carry
One
the
of the
season. This
best.
is like Nick Chubb level efficiency with his rushes, but with more usage or more consistent usage, as he's not getting Austin Eckler like targets, but he's getting enough targets where he has that boost in his repertoire, and then he just can break one at any point. Like he's just like, I think he leads the league in explosive plays by quite a bit, honestly. And he's got 15 total touchdowns on the season, which I believe also leads the league at this point as well, which is like just above guys like Connor and Eckler and a couple other guys in there as well. But yeah, let's move on to another storyline. There's only so much we can say about Jonathan Taylor. He's great. If you got him, you're sitting pretty right now in most of your leagues. Andrew, let's go to another storyline of the week.
Yeah, why don't we talk about the runner-up for most impressive fantasy week from a running back, which was Austin Eckler, which
always a bridesmaid, never a bride.
You almost gotta feel bad for that, where it's any other week, the 4 touchdowns, he'd probably be the top performer of the week, and it had to be on a week when someone
did it in
put up
prime
5.
time. At least he was, the exclusive
That's
game.
true.
He wasn't buried at 1:00 where Taylor was, but anyways.
I was almost hoping that at the end of the game they would just feed him another garbage time touchdown.
They didn't they get they got kind of one that was on like at the very end of the game on like the 2-yard line, and then they knelt it down. I was just like, oh, come on, just give him another one.
Close, but I mean, in a way, it was sort of a combined fantastic effort from both him and Herbert. That game, you could tell it was another one where Herbert was just locked in. Every time there's just some time where it's just with the eye test, you see a guy throw, you're like, oh, I have no doubt that he's just going to hit his target. Like, he just feels so dialed in. And Eckler just seems to be the main benefactor of that, whether Justin's throwing or not. It just sets the tone for the offense. And Eckler is just able to kill it in efficiency and make those plays to really set himself apart as a fantasy asset. And I think he's one of those people who just continues to be a perennially undervalued player. He can put up games like this, but how many people are ranking him as a top 10 dynasty asset right now? If you're not, you need to reconsider.
He's 26 years old. He's the same age as guys like, I think he's in a similar age as Ezekiel Elliott, Dalvin Cook, CMC.
I mean, a little bit younger, me. I think those guys are more often 27 at this point. I think Dalvin's 27 right now.
Is he 27? I'm not sure exactly, but they're all within like a year, one way or the other.
Either way, he's not older. So.
No, he's in there, and he's been really productive for going on 3 years now. And I know last year he had the hamstring injury, but when he was playing, he was effective. The year before that, he was effective when Melvin Ingram was holding out. He was effective when Melvin Ingram was in the game. And then obviously year, Melvin Gordon, not Melvin Ingram, who also was a former former Los Angeles Charger. I keep saying San Diego. This is my team, guys. Bolt up, baby. And Eckler's right now.
On all things Bolt.
Eckler is currently RB2 on the season. I'm not counting Derrick Henry right now because I'm just talking about rest of the season assets. But it goes Jonathan Taylor, 40-point drop, Austin Eckler, 30-point drop, Najee Harris, and then the only other guys that are also up there are in terms of points per game are Alvin Kamara and CMC, and they're a good 1.5, 2 points a game behind Austin Eckler as well. He's not only just been a top 5 back, but he's been far and away like outside of Jonathan Taylor there's no other better option. And it's to the point where it's making a huge effect on your lineups in a year, especially when it's not been a great year for running backs overall. I think if you looked across like from last year, the year before to this year, in terms of like the top guys in average points, it's significantly lower across the board. So Austin Eckler's been terrific. He needs to get his respect in fantasy value. And if you own Austin Eckler, I think like all three of us do in at least one league.
I might not have him anymore. I can't remember.
I think you traded him off, but you traded him off for a haul. I can't remember when you did.
I traded for him, so I have him on one.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, if you can trade for him for someone who doesn't treat him with respect, great. But if you own him, you cherish him. You cherish him, damn it.
I mean, thinking about that trade value and perceive that, like, I almost wonder if you can get him, like, it's no harder to get him than, like, an Ezekiel Elliott. Because I just feel like...
Yeah, maybe.
Some of these guys, like, I just feel like he falls... I just feel like there's not that type of respect. Like, when you see stuff from the forums, like, involving him, or you just see potential trades or how people offer for him, like, it just... He doesn't seem to get that same cachet that some of the other top backs get. Like, he's not getting what a Kamara gets, or command. He's not commanding certainly what a CMC or maybe even Dalvin gets, but his production on the year, and you have to imagine it's probably way harder to buy a Najee, who you mentioned was the number 3, that he's still far and above. That might be more understandable because you're getting a few years too.
Yeah, but Najee came out late, so
now,
I believe he's like 28 years old. Because anyone who comes out, anyone who stays for their
within
senior
a month
year,
of Khalil Herbert,
exactly. But this is just a digression. But like the narrative around any player who stays for their senior year is like, yeah, but they're so old now. It's like, what are we doing? But no, I mean, you can't. Again, with Jonathan Taylor and Austin Eckler, I think we talked about them preseason, and we all had them in some respects. I think I was the highest on Eckler going in. Andrew, you notably like put your foot down and staked your claim on Jonathan Taylor as a top 3 guy, and they've both come through. So these were predictable, and I think people were on them, but it's nice to see like, sometimes it's nice to see chalk, especially in fantasy where it can be crazy, like Cordarrelle Patterson being up there. But let's move to another storyline. And before I do get there, just for those of you watching live, we are going to get to some contender buys later, if you didn't hear up top. So if you have some trade questions, some trades you've seen in your leagues, or some trades you're looking to make as a contender, throw those in the chat. We'll try to answer those and incorporate those into our show after we get through the storylines and as we go through this episode. We're 3 weeks away from playoffs for most leagues, so it's time to get those trades in and make that push. But moving on to the storyline I want to highlight first is just a couple more tactical things right now. It came out today that Jason Garrett was fired by the Giants as their offensive coordinator. Hallelujah. We're not going to have a terrible offense anymore.
Freedom.
They're going to get a new, fresh, innovative mind in there. Let me check my notes. Freddie Kitchens, everybody.
Oh,
Freddie
God.
Kitchens
Oh, my
taking over.
this is where it all turns around.
Oh no! I didn't even know he was on a team. They let that guy handle it. Don't give that guy a clipboard. Get that play sheet out of his hands.
Oh my God! Yeah,
single-handedly was like, we don't run the ball with Nick Chubb, and I wouldn't get that. No, get the guy out of here.
I mean, I guess all you're hoping for is like maybe it's just gonna be a bunch of passes to Saquon and Tony. I guess that's what we're looking for. Thanks, Mike Hicks. No more hot garbage play calling. Yeah. More like dumpster fire play calling. We're going from totally a dumpster fire of play calling to hot garbage play calling. It's slightly better, but still really bad.
Freddie Kitchen knows nothing about hot garbage. He's like the only solid plays from Kitchens. Man,
just cold shit from him.
Gross. That's awesome. It's so hard.
What a visual.
It's so sticky. But let's so I just wanted to throw that out there as well. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Russell Wilson Pete Carroll situation in
pending
Seattle.
Divorce, maybe? I don't know.
Pending divorce. Like I brought this up
Well, no, I was just going to say that, Andrew. You brought it up a few weeks ago before Russell came back from his injury. I talked a little bit about more of the uncertainty of Russell Wilson staying there into the offseason. I think that's it has ticked up in likelihood that there could be some sort of parting of ways. Although I will say I think it's more likely than not that Pete Carroll's the one to leave and Russell stays at this point.
I saw polls today where
possible.
on Twitter where it's serious that like, wow, this is ramping up, because they were like literally that poll was on there like, do you want Pete to stay or Russ to stay?
Well, there's been talk for a while. There's
Are you Team Russ or Team Pete?
I'm Team Jacob. I'm Team Kendall. I'm Team Kendall.
Okay.
Oh no.
Oh, Mike, why are you gonna be the
why
turd
not
in
both?
the punch bowl? Why not
old
Zoidberg?
turd in the punch bowl.
I mean, but just to continue on with this, I mean, Russell Wilson has been bad in his 2 games back. The offense has been, I mean, obviously, like Pete Carroll is a defensive-minded coach, and I think there has been, honestly, since their Super Bowl loss to the Patriots, there has been criticism of Pete Carroll as a coach, and it's kind of simmered, and it's really ramping up to a head right now. And it just seems like, honestly, like if you want to keep Russell Wilson, I think the only way to do that is go get an offensive-minded coach to do something more, because the quarterbacks tend to be the last ones to be blamed. And I feel like the GM of that team, whose name I do not know, it's easier to replace a coach than it is to replace a franchise quarterback.
I mean, that might be the smart way to go with it, because like you said, Pete Holmes being a more defensive-minded coach,
Pete
Carroll.
Who did I say?
Pete Holmes.
You listen to too much Pete Holmes.
Guys, let's get here. Yeah.
Noted comedian and podcast host of You Made It Weird, Pete Holmes, also Seattle Seahawks head coach.
Guys, I'd like to talk about Ram Dass.
Stop.
And yeah. So
it's been a long weekend.
Pete Holmes, defensive-minded podcaster. Anyway, but we know that we're sort of a long way away from that Legion of Boom strong defense. They are not the defense they once were. They have sort of been soft, if not very noticeably. We know the let Russ cook type mantras. This team has been moving more towards that offensive-minded team, and maybe there's just not that coaching philosophy behind it. Maybe that is part of what's holding it back, and the lack of creativity, therefore, and maybe a lack in the last few years of protection for someone like Russ is leading to that frustration. One way or another, it does sort of seem like that one must go for the other to flourish. Then again, Pete Carroll kind of old, so I don't know if there's flourishing left in his future. The team might want to stick with their star quarterback and go.
They're on like the 3rd offensive coordinator in the last 3 or 4 years, because that was the problem last year. So they move on to Shane Waldron this year, and you're like, oh well,
from LA,
and it still just hasn't totally progressed. So at some point, something has to give, and now you're got to look at the head coach or obviously the quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's only so much leverage that Russell Wilson has since he's under contract, but I mean, he can demand a trade and they go from there. But I feel like it's probably not. It's hard for me to imagine that this team is going to continue along this path. I don't think they're going to win too many more games the rest of the season. They're going to miss the playoffs. They are really kind of on the outs. It just feels like Pete Carroll's gone at the end of this year.
Think about the carousel you could have, though, for just looking at quarterback for Wilson. There's going to be a lot of balls in the air in this offseason. You've got Deshaun Watson, Aaron Rodgers. You've got some teams that have to make some decisions on quarterbacks like Baker Mayfield. So, there could be some pieces moving out there where there's a carousel where, who knows, once that starts to happen, teams kind of evaluate their situation, and then you could see a complete shakeup in where these guys land next year.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're Seattle and then you make the decision that okay, Russell Wilson's situation doesn't seem long for this world. I mean, I I guess there is at least some. You've got a piece like a Tua Tagovailoa piece in Miami where presumably you could go and try to make a trade for him. Maybe you
Sure,
make a
yeah.
trade with Philly for Jalen Hurts, although with the way Jalen Hurts has been playing, like Philly might be fine where they. Oh well, listen, I'm not gonna. If Philly can get Russell Wilson, they're gonna get Russell Wilson. But like, there are some quarterback pieces you can get back where it's not like you're trading and then you're left with Jared Goff. Detroit. It's just. I guess if you're gonna make a move in an offseason, this may be the one to do it, but I just feel like that is the less likely scenario. Let's move on to another storyline. We'll do one more round apiece and then move on to our contender buy. So Jay, let's go back to you. Another storyline from week 11.
Storyline for me is let's keep it on Hurts. Eagles finding a balance there. Since they've done that, they're winning games, running the ball more. We talked about it on this show. Talked about it with Mike, who's been commenting tonight. Thanks for joining us, Mike. We talked about it on the cheat sheet just about at a certain point. I think we watched the Thursday night game where they just didn't run the ball and Hurts looked awful. Pretty much since that point, or maybe a couple weeks later, they finally found a balance there where they had to take all of the pressure and all of the weight off of Hurts. You had to kind of move things around there where you actually established a run so that you could open up his running.
Losing Miles Sanders to even conceive of that.
Yeah, and it took losing him to be like, oh, we have Jordan Howard now, so
what
now
timing?
we'll run the ball. Yeah, well, why not?
Oh, we can use this guy.
This guy's great. But it's done wonders from like just the balance of the offense. They've won games. During that time, Hurts actually had some lower fantasy performances, but you kind of saw it all come together this past weekend where he had a big week, ran for 3 touchdowns. So now look what's happening. And he had some electric runs in that game as well. Post 30 fantasy points. And Miles Sanders was back and he had like 16 carries.
And you know what it's also doing? It's
more than he's ever
up.
had.
Yeah, it's true. And he did have a bad fumble. And then Jordan Howard got injured and he came back later in the game.
Almost 100 rushing yards, which is
I mean, he was effective minus the fumbles when he did that. But like,
Right.
if you're watching that, obviously like the passing volume, and part of this is game script. Obviously, they got ahead big in this game. Then they had that game against Detroit where they got ahead big real quick. So like they ended up rushing the ball 50 times in this past game. But if you watch Jalen Hurts passing the ball, it just looks like the offense has opened up a lot more for him. His protection is better because I think like it's just changed. Like it's playing a lot of this like read option, playing some more play action with them has just opened up the passing game, and he's just making throws he wasn't doing. Mostly he's making throws over the middle of the field, which like if you look at his pass chart from early in the season, he was not throwing over the middle of the field. It was all outside the numbers and screens. And it's just like, that's not where you're going to pick up chunk yardage. So like since then, there's been a higher floor for Devontae Smith and for Dallas Goedert, who are good over there. So it's made the whole offense work so much better.
Yeah, and for fantasy, his rushing carries going back to week 6 till now, 10, 13, 7, 10, 13, 18 attempts a game from the rushing perspective.
Yeah.
And he's the best overall this year on QB1 performances. So top 12s, 10 of 11. He's had 1 week when he wasn't a top 12 play, which is nuts. That's like, I think the next highest is like 7 or 8, right in that range. So he's clearly the guy you play. Even if he struggled in those games, he was still putting up points. And now the team's starting to win a little bit. They're in the mix there for the playoffs. Which
I do want to just note that I did say I thought that Philly before the season would be better than people thought they were.
Yeah,
and
such an ambiguous
No,
prediction.
I put a number on it. I said I thought they would win I thought they'd win like 8 games. I thought they would win 8 games.
They're in the mix for playoffs.
And they're probably going to win 8 games, especially if you look at their schedule.
Which is also very important for him because of job security. That is still the knock to fully invest in him in Dynasty is still that fear that how long term does this team, like until he gets kind of gets an extension, gets money thrown at him, a big contract. That's kind of the fear is that like, man, would this team just take Watson? or something, or draft
Well,
a
that's
guy
that
at some
real
point,
life
so.
NFL fear that we had, and you've brought it up a lot, Jay, with how that kind of like, hey, a guy might be good fantasy wise right now, but if the team's losing or if they're sort of playing for a contract and not really looking that great in real world terms, like how long can you expect them to hold their starting job or just stay in the place that they are? Like, where's that consistency that you're going to get for the future? And them sort of turning things around, him looking better, playing better, making more big plays in runs, and overall getting wins, which is the most important thing for actual NFL teams, is making a much better case for himself being the guy long term. And that's the type of stuff that we want to see in turn for evaluating these guys in Dynasty.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to our next storyline. Andrew, what do you got?
CEH locks first rushing touchdown
Andrew,
of the season in week 11.
I can't allow you to talk about CEH.
I put that in the spreadsheet as almost like a little joke to you guys, but I mean, still, damning stat. No, I kind of wanted to just talk a little bit about Justin Jefferson. Just I know we've talked about him before, but again, huge week this past week. Launching him right into that top 5 area that we want to see someone like him. That I think we all kind of have him in our top 5 dynasty wide receivers right now. After our last conversation, but yeah, this past week, 8 receptions, 169 yards for two touchdowns. What is it?
Mike's a Chiefs fan, so CEH only scored once because I was in the.
He was at the game.
Oh, I bet that was
Mike
awesome.
Was at the game this week, yeah.
What a boring game to go see, Mike.
Yeah, man,
Chiefs
no touchdowns.
Could you tell any?
Denied.
Was it even possible to tell the difference between CEH and Darrell Williams playing?
It was not.
But yeah, I'm just loving me some Jefferson right now. He's just one of the, like right now operating at a 25.5% snap target share, and also just kind of killing it in all productivity, efficiency stats, like whether it's receptions and receiving yards per reception, and just overall catch rate. He's just knocking it out as like a top 20, if not top 10 receiver in every single category. He's just an extremely efficient and productive receiver. And then adding to that he just, when you watch him, he just feels like a special player too. Like that touchdown from this one of the, like that highlight reel one where he's just kind of fighting with the guy and they're both kind of pushing off each other, and we like his contested catch ability as well. That was one of the things we highlighted when he was coming out. His ability to kind of fight that guy off, make that catch, and then sort of still circle around him to get into the end zone. I just love when you see a guy that's willing to just like fight for, like almost have that fist fight. Like I've given that to DK Metcalf, kind of loving his like, if not excessive, like wanting to fight with the guy covering him.
Well, you love the compete. I mean, it's just there. I mean, you see the same thing with like Kadarius Toney out there. Like,
yeah, when you just sucker punches a guy well after the play.
But even so, even watching this last game where he put up a Rondale Moore-esque stat line, 7 for 40.
7 for 40. I love
Rondale Moore, Kadarius Toney, and Jalen Waddle have to have like the lowest ADOTs of all players.
Kadarius Toney, to his credit, he probably did double that going forward and backwards.
How many times did he say, just go forward, Tony? My God, like
he's just making shapes out there. He's the human Etch-a-Sketch.
It is his instinct to just circle back and try and like run to the other side of the field. It's like you can't do that anymore.
Man, but he's fun to watch. All 3 of those guys. This is complete diversion. With the ball in their hands, it's crazy. Those 3 guys.
It's just like watching a video game.
Their
So one of my kids
Yeah.
grabbed the joystick and he's just like,
Oh my god.
going nuts.
circles, just going crazy.
It's crazy that those three guys were in one draft as wide receivers. Back to Jefferson, though.
But overall, and then in the I just love seeing him be a big part of that offense, getting a big win over Green Bay there. That was the game that like almost looked out of hand at a point there. But yeah, just anything to take down Rodgers. I don't know. Division rivals.
Yeah, that was great. I that was nice to see in that game. Vikings are a weird team. Most people probably had Green Bay. Probably people lost a lot of money. I was kind of like rooting for the Vikings.
I was
and we're kind of into them. And then like, because like I was listening to like Mina Kimes podcast, but she's like, I don't know. I think the Vikings might win. And I was like, yes, I hope so.
Yes, anything you say.
Let's move on to another storyline. Also, just want to say in the chat, surprised that Gary, our father, hasn't come through yet. He's usually spammed the chat by now. Dad, Gary's corner is waiting for you. Let's move on to.
He's asleep.
He's asleep. He fell asleep with the YouTube up on his Kindle or whatever a tablet he uses.
Thanks for showing up.
Thanks for showing up. He probably it's like, I don't know, I minimized the chat. I can't get it up now. Let's move on. What do I want to pick for another storyline? Oh, we've got so many that are good. I want to talk a little bit about Joe Mixon. We've talked about him before. He is right now running back 8 on the year in average points per game. Obviously, Derrick Henry is still in there above him, which is still crazy that Derrick Henry is still in the top 8.
That's the line right now. Can you get over the Derrick Henry line? That was already at sufficient total points.
Average ain't gonna move for Derrick, so he's never gonna pass him there. But if he could get over his total points, he'd be in a good spot.
He'd be in a good spot. But he's just an interesting player because I think like Joe Mixon gets a lot of hate, and I think we've kind of always been like more negative than not on Joe Mixon, but ultimately coming down on the side of he's basically an RB2 and it's okay to be running back 16. And he's been doing better than that to his credit. But in breaking down the numbers, it's kind of interesting to look at, and it does like make you worry about his bubble popping because we all know he's a bit of a volume guy. He's got 4.2 yards per carry. He's not super efficient on that end. He needs to get a lot of touches to be effective on the in terms of yardage. He's got like I think 26 targets on the season, so he's not overwhelming in the passing game. Which is not a knock. I mean, it's not like Derrick Henry was the same way. Derrick Henry there we go. Dad's in the chat now.
Justin Jefferson, yeah, that's my favorite player.
Yeah, that's your favorite player. but with Joe Mixon, like, so it's like he needs to get a lot of touches, but he has been really good this year, mostly on the back of his touchdown efficiency. He has 6 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks, but I went to look at red zone touches overall. He has 9 red zone touchdowns on 22 total touches. That's 19 carries and 3 receptions in the red zone. That is a crazy efficiency rate of touchdowns in the red zone. For context, Jonathan Taylor has 10 touchdowns coming on red zone touches, and he has 65 touches. Austin Eckler's around 40 touches for, I believe it's 11 touchdowns on red zone touches. So the touchdown opportunities are not overwhelming for Joe Mixon compared to other backs, but he's just converting them at such a crazy rate, which makes me a little worried about that bubble bursting, because if that touchdown equity reverts to the mean of where he's been in his career, because this is by far the most touchdowns he's had, he then goes back to that RB back end RB2 land, mid RB2 land. But at the same time, he's getting 20 touches a game in a good offense. So I just don't know what to make of Joe Mixon at this point. Like, the numbers are very strange this season, And I guess like I'll ride it out for the season, but I guess I'm not buying into Joe Mixon long term.
Yeah, you can't really, the volume just, it's a stand. That's the biggest thing. And he's playing well, honestly, in the volume. Not, like to your point, not crazy efficiency, but honestly doing enough there where he'll pop like a big run. Like this past weekend, he did it later in that game. He had to run like a 20-yard touchdown, sort of to really solidify a big game on the week. And honestly, in that offense that is pretty, has weapons, and if he's on the field the whole time and he's getting the touchdown opportunities, that's going to be valuable. And with the attrition at running back, that kind of pushes him up into the RB1, which is where he's sitting right now, right in that 6 to 8 range. And, probably overall, when you look at the names, probably more of a back end RB1 at this point with guys you're going to roll out on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, it's just an interesting player. I mean, I was just kind of blown away by like not 9 touchdowns on 22 touches in the red zone. That's crazy.
I can't believe that 22 seems low. Yeah, but they have scored a lot of long touchdowns too. When you think about Chase's long touchdown, he takes away red zone opportunities because you're scoring from deep. But
yeah, I would love to see
happens.
ultimately where they're how many red zone touches over. Well, not a lot, because he has I believe 88% of their red zone carries.
I think it's just
like
the team scores. Think of Azuma scored from 30 yards out on multiple ones of his touchdowns. It's a team that sort of scores prior to the red zone and at a more frequent basis maybe than some other teams. But
yeah, very strange overall. But should we move on to our contender?
Yeah.
Buys? Any other storylines we wanted to honorable mention? Just quick throw out.
Well, I mean, Adrian Peterson, we hardly knew you.
Yeah, he's cut. He didn't really do much. Raiders are falling apart still. That offense has been bad. Derek Carr's been QB 22 over the past 4 weeks. That's been rough.
He's back.
Cammy's back. I'm back. I think we'll get into him a little bit in our Dynasty contenders. No, so basically, as we're going through some of these, we're going to go position by position, talk about some names. But I think it's also important to talk about with some caveats. Obviously, all leagues are different. Different players are available. We're assuming in good faith that the Jonathan Taylors, the Austin Ecklers, are probably more likely than not to be on competing teams, although that's not going to be the case always in your Dynasty leagues. We also don't necessarily know. There may be contending teams that have a disordinate amount of draft capital to trade away and have multiple firsts in the next couple of years that can pay more for some of these players. But by and large, we're looking at kind of in the medium of life that in Dynasty, that you're looking for Dynasty contender players that fit a certain set of criteria. Assuming that you're maybe a little low on tradable capital, that you are, looking for certain players. So ultimately, we're looking at a player that is obviously productive. We're looking at a player whose relative cost is on the lower side. We're looking for players as Dynasty buy candidates who are preferably less injury risk relative to their position. Obviously, that's tough to judge. We're looking at schedule for the rest of the year as well. Like I think we've talked about the Eagles' schedule down the road being pretty easy, and there's some other teams that have some cupcake schedules going along the way, and some other things as well. But if you're in a league and you have the possibility to buy Jonathan Taylor, buy Jonathan Taylor if someone's willing to sell them. I don't know why they would. But
Eckler would be more viable than
Eckler would be more viable.
Taylor, just don't trade Jonathan Taylor. Whoever.
What does it cost?
No, but I mean, even
everything.
Probably a better example would be like a like a Devontae Adams. Wide receivers tend to be a little bit cheaper, but it's just a little tough to go with. So those are the kind of criterias that we're putting in mind. Anything else you guys are looking for before we get into some names in your contender buy candidates as we head into the playoffs?
In terms of criteria, production, obviously, but you've hit on like the main things there, just in terms of strength of schedules, definitely key. pay attention to the bye weeks coming up. There are still teams that have some buys if you need to win the next couple of weeks. And also, there's always, you can factor in long-term value. It doesn't matter for the ship this year, but it's an added bonus. If it's a younger player or a mid-tier, mid-range in terms of their age that you think you can get. You could still win with them next year after, that type of thing.
Yeah, so let's go in, and I want to actually kick us off with wide receivers, and we got a question from Mike Hicks. Going for Title 1 QB, need a wide receiver. Who should I target with one or both of my second-round picks? Okay, so you're looking at kind of probably, I think there's ultimately like two kinds of players you're looking at for contenders. You're looking for like, in the most innocent of ways, hole fillers. Sorry, I'm 12. I'm giggling at hole fillers or difference makers. Those are the two things. You're looking to raise a floor or raise a ceiling. With second round picks, you're probably looking to raise a floor. So with that in mind, Jay, and I'll bring the question back up here so it's just there for everyone listening. Who would you be going after for in the second round picks range and in a Dynasty 1 QB league if you needed a wide receiver?
Yeah, a couple of them are definitely guys you could get for that price are probably particularly like one, maybe you have to add a second, depends on the league and how people value these players, but we have some guys on the list here. Hunter Renfrow, and we didn't have him on the list, Christian Kirk, who's almost the same player as Hunter Renfrow.
In a lot of ways, yeah.
Like guys that
I'll throw AJ Green in there as well, too.
They're not getting you 30 points a week, but they're getting you consistent, target share and getting you that 15 to 18 point range. And Renfrow scored a couple touchdowns. I swear every time I see the Raiders play or I'm facing Renfrow, he seems to score a touchdown. Been a lot more consistent than you think. They're not guys that immediately jump out to you like, I got to go trade for Hunter Renfrow. But from a consistency standpoint, these guys have been getting it done. And it's not going to cost you a lot because based on what I just said, like people don't necessarily value those players as long-term assets, as difference makers. So they're ones that you can use to plug in as your wide receiver 3. Flex, if you're playing multiple flexes and 3 wide receivers, you're going to have to dip into this deeper territory of guys. And those guys fit the bill of guys that maybe raise your floor if you're playing like Laviska Shenault and you bought into that and he's not getting it done for you. Or you were plugging in guys that got injured. You were playing like Jamal Agnew or something like that. And you're riding with guys that you picked up probably off the waiver wire in Dynasty. Go get yourself a guy that raises your floor a little bit, and that's going to be at the lower cost where you might only cost you 1 second, maybe 2, maybe you could throw in some pieces. But, like, really in that range, we're not having to give up a first.
Yeah, I mean, I have Hunter Renfrow in a few leagues, actually. He was kind of one of those guys that I just, like, stocked up the back end of my rosters with. And, like, as someone who would sell him in some leagues, like, a second-round pick would get it done, most likely. I mean, he's not going to, like... He feels a little Cole Beasley-ish, like as far as like he's kind of like this year's Cole Beasley, but he feels like a guy who can, if you need him to plug a flex spot or a wide receiver 3 spot, and if you're top heavy at other positions, he's perfect for that. He gets 7 targets a game on average this season. Like he's got a good target floor. He's a guy who is obviously used a lot in that offense. He's got a good target share there. It's really Waller, and then it's Renfrow in that offense. And he's wide receiver 24 on the season so far. So, I mean, I like him. And then he can just kind of sit on, be a streamer for you if you fill out later. I think he's useful for some years down the road as well, because I believe he's 25, 26.
Yeah, he's not
something
old,
like that.
He'll probably keep doing the same thing,
Yeah, he's not fast. He's not athletic. But he's a good route runner. And relatively athletic, I should say that. I mean, he's
much
way more athletic than any of us. So like, no shade to Hunter Renfrow there, but it seems like his game will age well, a la Cole Beasley. Andrew, we'll shift a little bit away from this question as well. To get out of this, but if you did have another person to throw out in this range,
throw someone in like a Darnell Mooney. That I think if we're looking in that sort of price range, maybe a little lower production than some of the other guys that you mentioned, but seems to be like that one kind of consistent spark in the Chicago offense. Like as clunky as they've been at times, he seems to be the receiver who can get it done there. So I don't mind kind of taking a stab at him, especially if we're theoretically trying to bump up that floor from like a Laviska Shenault or someone who's like really disappointing for your lineup.
Yeah, if you have an Allen Robinson who you're relying on, but he's not really doing much of anything. Yeah, I think those are the kind of range I'm looking for. But let's talk a little bit more about wide receivers and look more at the top end of guys who I say would be difference makers. And the guy I'm going to start with is Adam Thielen. Because I think relative to cost, given his age, he's 31, he's wide receiver 12 on the season right now. Which also, just side note, we were talking before the season and had an over-under on will there be multiple teams with 2 wide receivers in the top 12. Right now, Jefferson and Thielen are both top 12. And
Yep,
Godwin...
5 and 10, I think.
Yeah, something like that. And Godwin and Mike Evans are 8 and 9, I believe. So it's trending that way. But Adam Thielen's been terrific this year. He's gotten 8 targets a game. That offense is moving the ball. And his touchdown equity has not gone away. Like, he just keeps scoring touchdowns. Scored another one this past week. And like I said, he's a wide receiver. He's a back-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2 for, a fraction of the price, for 75 cents on the dollar. For what you're going there. I think, Jay, you've had Adam Thielen some places and you've moved him. Andrew, I think you've moved Adam Thielen some other places. If I came to you right now, you're a non-compete team, I'm a compete team, and I offered you a first-round pick for Adam Thielen, would that be an accept? Would that be a quick no, or does that get it done? Is that close to getting it done?
Yeah, I'd do it for
I'd do it for a 1. I mean, that's one of those ranges where if you're being a stickler, or it's like maybe like a future, even though I think right now, everybody considers probably 2023 picks like just as good as 2022. But it like in other years where like further out picks might not be quite as valuable, like maybe you look for a little bit more on top of that first. But I think I'm right in there that I'm not complaining about a first round pick for Thielen late or otherwise.
No, and maybe if it's like something where you're like, okay, give me a flyer young player and Adam Thielen and a first for Adam Thielen. I do like a Josh Palmer or Tyler Johnson.
Or if someone's kind of out on like a Terrace Marshall who's been relatively unproductive, maybe you can squeeze that out of someone. But I mean,
would you do if I offered you Terrace Marshall in a second? Would you do it? Would that get it done?
No,
I would do that.
Would you?
Yeah, I mean, if you're in rebuild,
can I still work a pick swap?
Like, I don't know, soft rebuild, like where like if you're 2 years out, Thielen, I just like you gotta kind of cut bait.
Because now we're probably talking late second though, and it doesn't feel as good to me.
Yeah, you want to feel it. Maybe if it's a higher second, that'd be a little bit better. But like I like the Marshall piece. I think you want to. Those are the types of guys you have to it's only year 1. Like we haven't seen enough about him.
Well, we're projecting,
so you're going to project like he was a guy who in the top, 15 to 20 range in Superflex last year. So you're almost getting 2 2s there. Maybe you squeeze another little thing out of that, but I'm good with getting a nice prospect we liked.
Yeah.
A pick
what about
Tony? Not going to help you.
What about Marshall and a pick swap, like a late first?
Well, that's what I guess I'd be hoping for. If I'm a stickler,
you add on to it, I'm good with that too. But
like give Thielen in a second
first
for Marshall. Yeah,
Thielen in an early second for Marshall and a late first, something like that.
Even better,
it's probably it's depending on the late second. What about like Kadarius Toney straight up?
I think you can get Toney in a pick too.
I think you still need to get
2
because the basis of this trade is like who's going to help me win more right now. It's going to be the number 10 receiver on the year. I think you can command the pick on top there.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think that's probably
something where it could any different than Marshall. I had Marshall above Toney, so I'm not really wavering too far off that.
Yeah, I think I've swapped them a little bit. I think I prefer Tony
Yeah.
now to Marshall, but
I
not
do
yet
too, and maybe
sure
that's
which
why,
way.
like,
I haven't
Tony in a second feels fine to me, but like I sort of recoil to the Marshall in a second. But if I'm sticking with my guns on Marshall, then a second and either of them should be fine. I just feel like maybe I could squeeze out more on top of
Yeah.
like it's because you always hope that you can play someone else being frustrated with without that immediate production. But sometimes
Yeah,
you just
absolutely.
you can't be that concerned about like trying to crush the trade. You'd be like, I like this prospect, and I'm getting a little on top of him.
Yeah, and throw out some other names here for wide receiver. We had Cordarrelle Patterson on our wide receiver list. It depends on what. Sometimes he's a running back and a wide receiver. Sometimes he's just a running back. Sometimes he's a wide receiver. We had him on a wide receiver there. He's still a good buy. We've talked about him before. Has a little bit of an injury that he's dealing with, so that would be a monitor. And then Keenan Allen, also in a similar boat as Adam Thielen. I think he probably is a little younger, probably costs a little bit more, but he's averaging 10 targets a game. And has really come on later in the season after Mike Williams kind of tapered off there as well. Beyond that, any other wide receiver names you want to throw on the list?
I think we hit all the main ones that I think are good, affordable buys.
Yeah, and like to the same point, like Devontae Adams, terrific if you can get Devontae Adams, but it's going to cost
Cooper Kupp, if you can snag him.
If you have Cooper Kupp, do not sell Cooper Kupp. Just hold Cooper Kupp.
I wouldn't.
Ooh, selling them all day. Let's move to quarterbacks a little bit, and let's tuck in it again to the chat. If you have any questions, we're going to be talking about quarterbacks for a little bit now. If you have any trades you want to throw out there or scenarios like Mike did, put them in the chat, and we will get to them. So let's start off. I'm going to bounce it the other way to you, Andrew. Let's throw out a quarterback name that you're targeting as a contender right now. And let's say, for argument's sake, we're looking at Superflex for this, as where the quarterback market becomes more valuable.
This is a tough one because there's like sort of a huge disparity in some of the names that we have in here. I feel like I love the idea. I just can't imagine. Like, I think Tom Brady, just because of his age, is always like this huge, like rental bot. Like, just because you're like, how many more years could he have? But I don't know what the scenario is in real life that a contending team hasn't already bought Tom Brady like 2 years ago.
Yeah,
so I don't think there's a scenario left where there's a rebuild team that has Tom Brady on their roster.
You would
but
hope
if there
not.
is, I would be going for that one. But otherwise, I kind of like Cam Newton as a buy. I just feel like there's some sort of resurge in his playing going back to Carolina right now, and they seem to be sticking with him. He's been successful. I think even running, he just looks better.
Is it just me, or does he look faster than we watched a lot of him?
You know how
being from New England last year.
I saw way more of his really clunky play last year than I wanted to, and it's just, again, I don't know if that was really the results of just a long time recovering from COVID and stuff. Like, and these guys are playing at a high level, so it's like, even if like he didn't hit like the worst cases of that, like if it's enough to sort of take that like athletic edge off of a player, like you're gonna notice when they're playing with a bunch of other guys that are also playing at that level. But I don't think, like, I mean, you say that joking, but I think he actually looks kind of fast. He's got better mobility to him. He looks like he's throwing better. He's connecting with some of the guys. Like, I mean, that was a great touchdown pass to Christian McCaffrey, who kind of made some ups to go there and get that. But like, it was just some great passes on, like, where last year I feel like his throwing, how many dirt balls did he throw last year? That accuracy and arm strength was terrible. So I think right now he's already sort of showing like he can still play at like a top 24 quarterback level, which is what we're concerned with in Superflex. especially headed towards the playoffs where you're seeing other quarterbacks going down, or maybe you're not getting them reliably coming back as soon as you thought, a la your Kyler Murray's, or even Lamar Jackson, or just
Russell
any
Wilson,
of these
who's
guys.
looked bad.
Russell
since
Wilson,
coming back.
speaking of someone who didn't look great, but I think people are still probably feel burned on Cam. So that's the guy that I think between, the productivity that he's shown in these past 2 weeks, and his relative cost as compared to the other guys in the field, I don't think you can get a better value pick for a guy who very well may be giving you top 24 quarterback production and really fill that QB2 gap that you're looking for heading into the playoffs.
He's a QB. Why? Top 12, Andrew. Too low. Top 12.
I mean, well, we talked about Jalen. We talked about
What?
Jalen Hurts and how much less can Cam Newton do in terms of upside.
It was a top
than
5.
Jalen Hurts.
His first start, top 5. I mean, not saying he's going to do it
he's
every
been
week,
a top.
but
Yeah,
that rushing floor that adds.
I'm trying to bake in regression just to be like sensible, but no, you're not wrong.
He's the best buy. He's the he was the best pickup. He was the best buy for like quarterback needy teams wanting to make a push. Just because.
Yeah, I just picked him up in a league. I spent it was a Debbie
it
league.
Shouldn't
so
cost because there's
overall pick.
no trajectory for him going forward. We have no idea what he's going to do next year. So
He's
if
not
you have
signed
him-
past this year.
If someone has him on their team and they're not a contender, that should be an easy trade. I would think to get that done. What did you trade for him in that league? You traded a top Debbie pick? Was that your trade?
I traded my first round Debbie pick.
Yeah, this is a Debbie league, so number 1 Debbie pick, first round. Like
I want to sell him in one of our other leagues.
That's super flex too.
Yeah. Because I had Matt Ryan as my QB2, which
and he scored like 2 points combined the last 2 weeks. So.
Yeah,
things are going great in Atlanta.
Let's move on to another name, Jay. And who else do you want to throw out there?
So I mean, I like Cam at the top here. Obviously, Brady makes sense too. If you're a little bit farther down, I look at that 2 guys that are fairly similar. Like Kirk Cousins is always, I feel like, affordable enough, but you probably have to pay a little bit more. And then Taylor Heineke's a name we get down. He's actually kind of sneaky, because he's actually been productive and their schedule's nice down the stretch. Like he gets
that division, a lot of divisional.
He gets
matches.
Eagles twice, Dallas. The Eagles have played some feisty defense occasionally, but like they're not great. Like he has some teams that he can go against and play well against. I think they play Seattle this week. Their defense isn't necessarily great. Had their bye, so.
And another mobile quarterback, another mobile guy.
And he's in close enough to Cousins in production, but you're going to have to pay way less actually for Heineke. So he's almost discount. Cousins doesn't run, so I'm not comparing their play style, but he's almost discount Cousins, where you can flirt with QB1 numbers, but for a fraction of the price to fill in maybe as your QB2 and Superflex.
Yeah, I like Heineke because I don't even think you. Like, given his contract situation, like he's a rental, like I don't know if he's starting long term. I don't even think you have to give up a first round pick for Taylor Heineke. I think if you have the first round pick to give up and you just want to be like, I'm desperate, I need the guy.
Yeah, that'd lock it.
Godfather
third back. You're getting something back maybe with him.
Yeah, I was gonna say this
you
might be another pick
with
swap
that.
thing.
Yeah.
But also you gotta think that sometimes with your budget of draft capital or prospects, if you have a first round pick mostly, and then you got like a couple things you're looking at, maybe he's not the guy, but sometimes that's the only kind of hole you need to fix in your lineup, and you can spend that first on him. Sometimes the situation just dictates that, like, hey, this is the one piece I need to put me over the top, and someone might be willing to dedicate. So that's another thing to kind of evaluate in a prospective trade partner's lineup.
Yeah,
if they look like they're one piece away, you might be able to get a little bit more.
So if I have a first round pick, I'm going to the Cam owner first, and then after that, I'm going to the Heineke owner, who's been QB 15 on the season, which is pretty solid and a good floor for him as well. And let's bring up another comment here from Andre. What about Tua with a soft schedule? Jets, Giants, Panthers. Don't love the Panthers game. That's a bit of a tough one. That defense is Stephon Gilmore. They've got a pass rush there. But Jets and Giants for sure. Love those matchups. And Tua's been good. He's been fine the past few weeks. I don't think he doesn't have much of a rushing upside, so I think that kind of caps him a little bit. But like, he's had a good outlet with Gaskin and especially Jalen Waddle recently, so he gets a lot of these short yardage passes, and I think he should be good against good teams. I think I'm just like, I think he's probably lower on my list because I think the Tua owner is going to want too much back for him, where I'd be more comfortable with Heineke, who, as we just said, I think you can hold on to your first round pick and still get Heineke.
Yeah.
Tua, I think
he's going to command.
You know, I'm just putting
used one on
putting my shoe. I think Tua is just a hold. I think Tua, you probably used a very high first round pick on him as well. I think Tua is just a hold to put myself in the shoes of a
14 too. So you're gonna lose.
Oh, that's annoying.
If you need it, if you need it.
Yeah, so I got that right here.
Yeah. It's just like in terms of I think redraft, he's a decent buy in a 2 QB league if you need another guy. In Dynasty, I think you're just gonna have to give up more than you'd want to get for the production you're gonna get. Where you're gonna have to pay significantly more than you would for Cam or Heineke, or even a guy like Tyrod Taylor, who we have on the league here as well, which is definitely more of a back end QB2, but it's certainly none of these guys are going to command a lot. If I'm a Tua owner, I just think I'm holding pat on him because, what else are you going to do at this point? It's just kind of a weird situation because there's the trade rumors that have circled around with him, so it's a tough situation with Tua. Let's move on to running backs real quick, and let's start. Running backs, I think, is probably the most bought player for contenders. That's one, so much attrition at the position, as we've said every single week, and it's just usually where you have holes to fill. Wide receivers you're more likely to be good at. QB is tougher to get just in general, although in super flex you definitely need them. Running backs seems to be a rotating door. I almost think you can't have enough running backs. So let's go around, and Andrew, I'll start with you. Who's one or two running backs that you are targeting as a contender?
I never thought I would say this, especially even going back to the beginning of this season or a couple weeks ago even, but I think still the best buy at running back is probably someone like James Conner. We're seeing him get, it looks like an average of 15 touches per game, and he obviously has a nose for the end zone right now, definitely lighting it up there. They just seem to want to get him involved in while... wow, I'm blanking on the other guy. Chase Edmonds. While Chase Edmonds is sort of out of commission, and even if he comes back, I feel like James Conner was already being very efficient for your team, even while he was in there. And now with the running game all to himself, he's just really tearing it up. And if we're talking about production versus relative cost, you're still not gonna beat that because he still sort of feels like that rental player that you can buy for less for some of these other more cachet players. You can certainly buy him for less than a Miles Sanders, who maybe you're kind of hoping that after his lack of production prior to the injury and the fact that he got injured, you're kind of hoping to maybe get him on the upswing. But Miles Sanders probably still commands a little bit more name value. And I don't know if he's the best buy, but you talked in previous weeks where you threw out a second round pick for him. So, if you can get Miles Sanders for a second round pick, I'd suggest doing that. But otherwise, James Conner feels like the bang for your buck guy. And even if you have to give something as much as that late first, you're a high contender, you're hoping to win the championship, that's going to be a late first. Conner is producing on par with that value. I would give that up in a heartbeat for him to make the difference.
Yeah, I think just given his touchdown equity through these past weeks, and like you said, with Chase Edmonds there, he was still getting a lot of run, and he's just looked pretty good. He's just looked good.
He gets pass catching work too.
We saw him get good pass catching work in Pittsburgh, and
it's nothing new.
that's an offense that's gonna like put him in the position to score quite a bit, and it's not like Kyler Murray when he was playing before he went out for these past few weeks has been vulturing a lot on the goal line carry. So like I think James Conner has at best QB1 RB1 value for you, at worst mid RB2 value for you, which could both make a difference for a touch for a playoff push for your team. Jay, other running backs that you are targeting?
I'll give two quick. One is dirt cheap. One might cost you a little bit more. Devontae Freeman is the cheap one, and Leonard Fournette is the little bit more expensive, but probably still not breaking
Those
the bank.
older guys.
And Devontae Freeman is the surprise of surprises in some ways, of a surprising season with a lot of guys. Cordarrelle Patterson's, like we said. I mean, Devontae Freeman.
He won the Baltimore lottery, I guess.
I mean, not on a team.
He
and
seems
he's
to be the guy. Yeah.
solidified himself as the guy on this team. Murray came back this week, Latavius Murray, and Devontae Freeman still commanded the majority of the snap share. He was basically close to 60% of the snap share. I think it was right around 58 to Latavius Murray in the 30s. And the nice part was that the touch wise, he got over 20 touches in this game, 16 carries, and also 6 targets, 6 receptions. So involved in both ways. They'll throw it to him as well. This team always commands a good running game because you have to account for Lamar. That this game was Huntley, it wasn't Lamar. Lamar missed this game, so they might have had to lean on him a little bit more. But like, he is won the race there to be the running back that's used the most on that team. So we like that going forward. So I like him for sure. And Fournette, a little bit more costly, but he's also solidified himself as, like we said before, regular season Lenny now, not just playoff Lenny. He's basically grabbed that job, and I'm impressed by his receiving totals too.
Lenny.
No, Omni Lenny. I am infinite.
Yeah, and that offense is great. But 3 out of the last 5 games, 6+ receptions. He's had 8 in one of those games. The guy, they'll throw these screens to them, these little check down dump offs that we know Brady can do, because Brady's not going to force it, not make mistakes. He doesn't care who his back is as long as the guy is catching the ball when he's throwing it to him, which Fournette is. He's not even a prolific guy who's not known for that, but he's catching it well enough to, in that offense, establish himself as the guy.
Yeah.
And these are guys like Freeman. I don't like a 2. I should get that done.
Oh,
and Fournette,
yeah.
probably more of a 1 in that case, which I'm totally fine playing because Fournette has the added bonus of playing the Jets in championship week. So if you have aspirations for being there, Fournette's a guy you probably would like to have in your lineup if he faces the Jets in week 17.
Oh yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah, I mean, I like both of those buys. Again, like Devontae Freeman fits more of that mold of like the whole plugger, like we're talking about. Like if you need a flex, if you're a top heavy team, but you just need a guy, like if there's just not a lot of guys getting 15+ touches or getting that amount of touches, and like every guy we have on our list here, well, Devontae Freeman's been averaging 13 touches a game recently, but I mean, he's been more than that recently in a good offense. Like that touch floor is really rare this time of year. And just to throw out a few more guys who we have on here, Darrell Henderson, who we've talked about before, still a buy, still a guy I like.
A lot of volume when he's playing.
A lot of volume when he's playing. He's been trending down a little bit recently. James Robinson in the same place. He's been a little banged up as well.
And Robinson.
And Robinson as well. But I still think both of these guys are good buys. Another guy I want to throw out there, Kareem Hunt. I like Kareem Hunt
coming back at some point.
Coming back, and he was a RB1 when he was there getting 15 touches.
Try to buy him now ahead of his return schedule.
Yeah, exactly.
As soon as he's back, I think the price jumps back up.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think he's worth the risk of a buy, particularly if you're a team that has maybe the luxury of taking a risk on a player like that. He can be a difference maker, but like, I would be sure you're not spending a first round pick on a guy who, like, he's coming back from injury, might not work out. Sometimes that happens where guys have a setback and they end up shutting them down for the season. So like, beware of that. But if you're a team who's like, you know what, I'm playing a flex play with a Hunter Renfrow. I have a flex play of a guy who's like, they're fine, they're good, they're a good floor play. I really want to make a push this year and put my team over the top. Kareem Hunt seems like the guy to go with there.
You just made that floor bump trade that we talked about earlier, and then you're like, this sucks and it's not enough to help me win the championship. Why did I trade my second for Hunter Renfrow? Let me go out and get a real player.
Well, but that's actually not a bad. If you can trade a second for Hunter Renfrow and a first for Kareem Hunt, and in the worst case scenario, you're flexing Hunter Renfrow. In the best case scenario, you're flexing Kareem Hunt with Hunter Renfrow as a backup. It's not a bad way to go.
Sometimes you hedge your bet, yeah.
I think you need one. I think it's good to have one or two of those, like the Devontae Freemans, the Hunter Renfrows, those low cost players that maybe if they're sitting on your bench, it's okay. But like players do get injured in the playoffs, and sometimes you need a contingency
know all too well.
Injuries
in the playoffs. It happens.
And at the same time, like you're not going to feel like you have a roster decision every week to make if you're like, I know who your starters are, you know what I mean? And then you have a player who's like, okay, if something goes wrong with, I don't know, Jalen Waddle, just to say as your wide receiver 3, say that's your guy. You have Hunter Renfrow to come in and fill in. That's a good position to be in. But I think we're running a little bit over, so I think we're just going to skip over tight ends a little bit. I will just throw some of the names we had on our list out there for tight end hits. Zach Ertz, I think, is the best possible buy for tight ends. Other guys, Dawson Knox, Logan Thomas, I think those are good, cost-efficient guys out there. I think there's, if you really want to make a difference maker tight end play, I think the only top end guy you can get at a decent enough value is George Kittle. I still think he's a little low enough for you to buy out of those like top 5 guys. Kelsey, you're not getting for a deal. Waller, you're probably not getting for a deal. Kittle's probably a little better for that. I mean, maybe like Mark Andrews, you're probably not getting for a deal. I think if you really want to swing for the fences, Kittle's your guy.
And if you want to lose, trade for TJ Hawkinson, probably.
Exactly. He'll give you lots of goose. TJ Hawkinson and Mike Gesicki could get you a 0 on any given week, could give you 30. Those are the guys.
It's exciting to that uncertainty.
That's
what we like.
If you want to,
uncertainty.
We love uncertainty. We love the possibility of a goose egg. We've been going on for a while now. We're 76 minutes at this point, so we need to wrap it up. So I'm gonna say good night and sign off. I'm your host, Josh Christensen. Thanks again for listening to the Brothers of Dynasty, and thanks as always to my 2 brothers, Jay and Andrew. Thank you, Jay.
Thanks, Josh. And you can find me on Twitter at JAYC_DFF. Write some for going for 2. Fantasy Cheat Sheet returns December 3rd, 8:30. That's Friday. So check that out. Come watch Josh and Andrew troll me on that show.
I was on it one week.
Yeah. Maybe one of them will be on the show. You never know. Check that out.
True, we do. I filled in for Mike one week, who was in the chat here. It was a good time.
Because he was at the Chiefs game, though.
He was at. Yeah, I know. It was nice. And and Andrew, thank you.
Thanks, Josh. And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Drewcy_music. And you can find music like the music at the top there for my band Ghosts in the Snow. You can find everything at ghostinthesnow.com. That'll lead you to all the socials, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, and also to the streaming sites like Spotify and Bandcamp.
Amazing. And you can find me at DFFJChris on the Twitters. Remember to follow our show page as well at Bros of Dynasty on Twitter. Subscribe to our Facebook page, Brothers of Dynasty. And if you're watching on YouTube, smash that subscribe button right now, Brothers of Dynasty on YouTube. Subscribe if you're listening elsewhere as well. And that is all for this week. We'll be back next week when we'll talk maybe a little bit about some Dynasty stashes. We'll field more of your questions as you're trying to contend for a championship as well. And we'll react to week 12 in the NFL. Don't forget to set your lineups and have a good night. Thanks so much. Bye, everybody. Hold your drinks up.
See ya.
Yeah.